Greetings all! Welcome! BWS2K here. Today we're going to cover Marvel Heroic Role-Playing System. We're going to cover that. It's an ancestor of Cortex Prime. So even though Marvel Heroic Role-Playing is available only on the secondary market, Cortex Prime, which dropped just a few months back, is available. It's available digitally at cortexrpg.com. I'll put a link in the description. You can also get a physical copy at your local retailers, wherever you would normally get role-playing books and things like that. We're going to do a little bit of a weird thing today. We're going to use Roll20 as the platform, which is a virtual tabletop. So after this little bit of intro spiel, I'm going to shrink myself down, and then we're actually going to go through the process that I give all of my new players in terms of not only learning Marvel Heroic, but also learning how to play it on Roll20. So if you are not interested in Marvel stuff, this is still going to be useful to you if you are at all interested in Cortex, the Cortex Prime system in general, because a lot of the language is similar, and a lot of the way the game flows is going to be the same way, and you'll see that almost immediately. I'm joined by Scott Summers here in the back. He's going to chime in every now and then with a little bit of info and advice. He knows a lot more about Marvel than I ever have known. We've worked together for a number of years now. It always works out pretty well. So we're going to get going on that. But again, thank you so much for joining. I hope you find this video entertaining. If not entertaining, beneficial to your experience. If not beneficial, then informative, or at least not annoying enough to click away from. And maybe you stick around for a while. We'll see how it goes. Thank you so much again, and let's get to it. Excelsior! Okay. You'll see here on the screen how I have things laid out on Roll20, and we're going to scroll through it, and I'm going to explain a little bit. I'm not going to get super detailed into all of the different nooks and crannies of the system. It's easiest just to discover those as you play, and we're going to do a playthrough, an example playthrough, and I'll walk through as we're doing that. When we do something new or do something that's worth mentioning, worth noting, I'll just call it out when we do it. I don't want to bog down too much in rules before we actually get to the fun stuff. But you can see we've got Marvel Heroic. I've got the little picture of Cortex Prime there down in the bottom because, like I said, it's kind of an ancestor to Cortex Prime. And I have a little picture there up here. I think you can see my cursor up here with a piece of the table of contents from Marvel Heroic. And I'm going to go down through that and just use that as a very, very general overview. And then we'll look at the data sheets there. I've got the blank example from the book, and then an example from a website called marvelplotpoints.com. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. Great resource, tons of really awesome stuff over there. They've got a good crew, and this I'm going to use data files from them and some that I created today because I don't really want to pull too much stuff out of the book. I'm not interested in earning the wrath of Disney. So I mean, not that I'm monetizing this video, but I'm not interested in any of that static. So, all right, let's get to it. We've got the table of contents. The first thing they list is hero data files, which is, like I said, you've got two examples here. You've got the blank one. So most of the ones in the book are set up like this, and you've got an affiliations section, a distinctions section, a power set section. Sometimes you have two power sets. Sometimes you just have one power set. You have specialties section and a milestones section. Now, in Cortex Prime, they would call each of these things a set. You'd have an affiliation set, a distinction set. For Dragon Prince, Tales of Xadia, they have, I think, attributes, maybe values. I know they use assets. So it's the different areas on the data files. That's generally how they're set up in the book, like that format. Skipping over to Gambit here from the plot points, they've got it arranged a little differently, but you can see all the information still pretty clearly. You've got affiliations up there, you've got distinctions, you've got, they put their stress tracks there for physical, mental, and emotional stress, whereas in the Marvel Heroic, they have it along that right-hand side. It's fine. He's got two power sets. He's got energy tap and telescoping bow, and then within those sets, you've got the power traits, or the trait dice for the different pieces of that power set, and then any SFXs and any limits. Then there's the specialty set underneath that, and then of course the milestones, which milestones are how, that's one of the ways that you earn XP in Marvel Heroic. Or really, it's the way you earn XP in Marvel Heroic. It's one of the ways that you can earn XP in a Cortex game. There's different ways to do it. It's a mod. Cortex is very much a toolbox, and you kind of pick pieces to use for your individual game. So Marvel Heroic uses milestones. Having shown both what's in the book and what is kind of the professional fans, if we scoot over a little bit more, I made this for a game I was running maybe 2 years ago. Somebody who was not familiar with the comics, not familiar with the cartoons, was only really familiar with the MCU movies, but wanted to play Wanda, wanted to play the Scarlet Witch. So we worked together on not just what her powers are in the comics, because I haven't seen all the MCU movies. Please don't hate. But kind of working together, well, what do you want to do and how do you want that to happen? So we actually created our own data file, and I didn't even bother with milestones because sometimes I don't use them. But you can see even here, the way I've got it laid out, you've got your different sets. You've got your affiliations and your distinctions and your power traits. She's just got one power set. And then the SFX's limits, and then I put her specialties at the bottom. I like doing that. I like designing unique data files for people. It's a good way to kind of custom and tailor and help them, because so many people, that is the case. I did another data file for someone for Mystique, and we were talking, and it became really apparent that she was like, oh no, I don't know anything about the comics. I just like the Jennifer Lawrence Mystique from the movies. And I was like, okay, all right, so let's back up a second, because that's a little bit different than depending on the comics, right? Excuse me. I'm going to take a drink from my Marvel mug here. Much better. So the point being, data files, doesn't matter how you format them, but they're going to have different sections on them that you're going to go through. And we're going to scroll back, because that was the first thing. Data files, hero data files, check. Dice, this is an easy section. I have a picture of the dice right here. You use D4s, D6s, D8s, D10s, D12s. In terms of how many you'll need, you'll probably need a couple D4s, a couple D6s, about 100,000 D8s, a couple D10s, and a couple D12s. That's the dice you use. You don't use any D20s. I know that's a big adjustment for people, but we don't use D20s in Marvel Heroic. We only use those kind of dice. We also use, so yay, good job. We did hero data files, we did dice. Now we're on to the plot points. Plot points can look like anything. They can be buttons, they can be chips, like poker chips. They could be, well, you could use actual potato chips if you wanted to. It doesn't matter. This is what some systems will call destiny points or hero points or whatever. It's the thing, it's the meta currency that you use. And in Marvel Heroic especially, and even in the book it describes it this way, it says that they are the currency of the game, and that's what the game ebbs and flows on. So plot points are not something you want to hoard. They're something that you want to use to activate and do cool things and tell an awesome story with it. So you want a lot of something, whatever you're going to use. I use buttons. I have just a bag of buttons, but you could use anything you wanted to. And on Roll20, I use the little symbols like there. I normally set up a deck of cards on Roll20 and then make it an infinite deck of cards and then only put one card in it, and it looks like that. And if you've played with me, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And then we deal it out to players as they need them, and then when they're done, or when they use it, they can just put it on the table and we delete it. Okay. That's good. The Doom Pool is the next thing on the list. Doom Pool is what the Watchers, the GMs, use. We don't have plot points. We have the Doom Pool, and the Doom Pool represents a sort of ambient level of threat that's going on in a scene. So as it grows, I am able to use that to do more, like a challenge will be more difficult. So let's say you're fighting Magneto, right? Magneto has his own data file, and you know you're trying to punch him or something like that. Then I would select his dice, and we'll get to how that works in a minute, but I would select his dice in terms of how he would dodge or duck or block or whatever. But if you were trying to do something like defuse a bomb that doesn't have a data file, or if you were trying to kick down a door, I use the Doom Pool for that. And as the scene goes on and the Doom Pool grows, it starts out at 2d6, but it may end up with lots of dice in it. As it grows, then those things can become even more difficult to achieve. But, like plot points, I can spend dice out of the Doom Pool to do things for my characters, just like players use plot points for their characters. So it's kind of my version, the Watcher's version of plot points, and they work very, very similar. Okay, so that's hero data files, dice, plot points, Doom Pool. The next section is called stunts, resources, and push dice. That's just a way that you use plot points, so I'm not going to go into it's the nooks and crannies bit. You'll see some of it in action in our playthrough. It's just some ways that you use plot points to do certain things in the game. The next section is called effects. It's called assets, stress, and complications. So in a really, bird's eye view of that, assets are things that you create to be used. So instead of punching Magneto, if you said, well, I don't want to attack Magneto, I want to make some kind of like plastic baton that I'm going to hit him with, well, then you can do all the same things that you normally do, but now you have this asset called plastic baton or something like that. It's a piece of equipment. It could be a piece of information. It represents something that's being quantified mechanically that you've created or you've borrowed that is going to help you later on down the road. Stress, I talked about stress on the data files. When you get injured in Marvel Heroic, there are basically 3 ways in which that can happen. You can take physical stress, which is the punching, the kicking, the being knocked out and unconscious and things like that. There's mental stress, which is kind of about being confused, or it kind of has to do with like absent-mindedness, or if you have a concussion or something like that. It has to do more on the mental side of things, not so much physical. You might look fine, nobody maybe punched you, but you've got some knockout gas or something like that. And then emotional stress is when you are scared, or when you are, if somebody's trying to use like pheromones, like maybe Purple Man is trying to coax you, influence your character in some way, that might count as emotional stress because you're feeling loyalty to him or something like that. So they kind of divide it up into those 3 different sections, and it starts out empty, and then as you gain it, it steps up, and it steps up from the 4 to the 6 to the 8. And if you are ever at D12 stress on any one of those tracks, and it gets stepped up again beyond the 12, then you are stressed out and taken out of the scene. So if you are, at D12 physical stress, you're really beat up, bruised, broken, whatever, and someone wallops you, and steps up that stress, then you're knocked out or whatever. You narrate how it happens. Obviously, if it's emotional stress, then you've become completely loyal to the Purple Man, or whatever, completely scared, and you flee the scene. You're out of your wits, things like that. Okay, stress, and then complications. So complications in Cortex Prime, stress is a mod. You don't have to use it. Complications are like stress, but they're everything. So I might put I might put a complication on you, a D8 tangled up in webs, right? Maybe Spider-Man, you're all tangled up in webs. It's not really physical stress. It's not really mental stress. It's not really emotional stress, but it's still something that's hindering you. It's complicating your life, right? So it's a complication, and it works the same way. It gets stepped up, and then if it ever gets stepped up past 12, D12, then you've been complicated out of the scene. You've been so webbed up you can't participate anymore, something like that. So in the same way, like that's how stress works, that's how complication works. They're kind of the same thing. Physical stress is just a subset of complications. Mental stress is a subset of complications. Works the same way. But Marvel Heroic is an ancestor of Cortex Prime, and it wasn't really presented that way, which is fine. Okay, effects, assets, stress, and complications. Number 2 is playing the game. Action scenes and transition scenes. Again, referencing Cortex Prime, they have something called action order, I believe is what it's called. I'm reaching back, and I'm not sure if I'm saying that the right way. I think it's action order, but it's basically the flow of the game is action, reaction, action, reaction. In Marvel Heroic, every action you have is equivalent to a panel on a comic book page, or maybe like a triptych, like a doom, doom, doom. You don't say some giant thing. Scott over here, great example, right? Scott says, I'm going to use my optic blast, and I'm going to blast Magneto. Boom, that's beautiful. That's like a one panel thing, right? Maybe like one of those big long stretches across the top of the page, right? Awesome. Scott's next turn, he says, all right, I'm going to experience existential angst because I have a girlfriend and she's dead, but she's not, and I'm married to her clone, and I have a kid with her. So as I'm piloting the Blackbird and monitoring all of the sensors, I'm starting to think back and have flashbacks and really miss Jean, and a tear forms in my eye. Okay, yeah, look, Scott, that's really great, and that's A+ for role-playing, but that's like panels and panels, or like maybe an entire issue or a season arc, right? Keep it short, do the thing. So that would not be a good example of like one action. That might be something that extends over, multiple turns or whatever. I don't know. However you would work it. But the idea is everybody's turn is kind of a beat. Boom, 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 boom. And then once you've gone around the table, and that's an entire turn, that's kind of like a page on a comic book. And then as you go through the encounter, right, it's kind of like a scene, right? That's why we call it a scene. So after you've had a couple scenes, you have a session. That's the issue of the comic book. All right, that's how they separate out the actions and reactions and the pacing of the game. In terms of mechanically how it works is I make an action and then there's a reaction and then we compare and we resolve that. So if you see right on my screen, it says underneath the dice, it says say it, assemble it, roll it, resolve it. And that's how you walk through a turn. You say what you want to do and you say it clearly, because whether you succeed or fail, it's a role-playing game, it's not a dice game. You're providing a narrative for what you're doing. You say it clearly, and then you assemble your dice pool. The way you assemble your dice pool is you go down through each of your sets, each of the areas on your card, and you choose applicable dice. So if Scott's blasting Magneto, Scott's going to go down on his sheet, and he's going to say, okay, which distinction am I going to use? I guess affiliation's at the top, right? So he's going to go, which affiliation? He's doing it by himself, well, then he's going to choose his solo die. If he's doing it with a friend, or if he's acting as part of the whole team, then he's going to grab the die that's appropriate to that. He grabs a distinction, he grabs his power set, which for him, he's only got one. It's Optic Blast D10. But he grabs that, checks to see if his SFXs or limits anything going on there special. He picks a specialty, probably like Combat Expert, and then he has that pool of dice. And anything else, if he's got assets floating around, if the enemy has a complication on them, something like that, put it all together and roll it. He said what he wants to do. He wants to deal physical stress to Magneto by hitting him with an Optic Blast. He's assembled his pool, and now he's going to roll it, and he rolls it, and then he looks through that pool. He's going to take out any ones, because rolling a 1 in in Cortex Prime, they call it a hitch. In Marvel Heroic, they call it an opportunity, but it's the same thing. If you roll a 1, you can't use that 1. You set it aside, and then you pick 2 dice to add up for a total, and then you pick a third die, and that's going to be your effect die. Again, I'm saying all this, you're going to see it in a little bit, and then that's going to probably make a lot more sense to you. But that is exactly the process that works in whether you're playing Eidolon Alpha, which is one of the settings in the Cortex Prime Handbook, whether you're playing Dragon Prince Tales of Zadia. I'm going to mess up every time I say it. I watched one episode, it wasn't for me. I love you all, and I like dragons, but it didn't click with me. It's okay. It's be the same thing there. You'd go through and you pick an attribute, you pick a value. If you've got an asset, and then you roll and you set aside the ones. You add 2 dice together, and that's your total. And then you pick a third die for an effect die. And the die that you choose for your effect die doesn't matter what number is on it. What matters is the size. Is it a D6, a D8, D10, D12, etc. All right, so that's that section. Playing the game with action scenes and transition scenes. So let me just back up a little bit. Transition scenes. So an action scene is when you're doing something that has an opponent, or you're in some actiony stuff. Transition is more like the bridge scenes. It's like the traveling to the location, or the lull in the storm between bad guys. And that's a time when you can heal up, you can create assets to use later on, or resources. That's kind of like the quieter moments, moving from one big set piece to another big set piece. But either way, it's the same. There's an action and reaction in terms of if you're creating something with an asset or whatever. Okay, taking action, I pretty much just covered it. For It's Clobbering Time and Heroism, Headaches, and Heartbreak. They're just talking about stress there, and some more of the stuff that I've already mentioned, so we're not going to dwell. And then understanding data files. I'm going to spend just a couple minutes talking about this, and then we're moving right along. Okay, affiliations, I already kind of said. An affiliation die says, how are you performing this action? Are you performing it alone? Are you performing it with a buddy? Are you performing it as part of a team or with the team? The caveat there is, if you are performing your action with someone else, then on their turn, they need to probably, narratively it could be, there's some wiggle room, but they're probably going to need to use that die as well. So for instance, Wolverine and Colossus have the fastball special, where Colossus throws Wolverine, right? So Wolverine and Colossus, whoever is doing that on that scene or in that action, that's a buddy action, okay? you could debate whether or not, after Wolverine uses the buddy die to be thrown, on Colossus's turn, is he still making a buddy action if Wolverine is halfway across the road, flying it? It's kind of a narrative thing. You keep it loosey-goosey. But generally speaking, if they're doing something in tandem, then on the other character's turn, they're probably going to be using that affiliation die. And the same with team. If you're all working together as a team, you kind of want to be all working together as a team, right? In my Roll20 games, I actually put everybody's data file out on the tabletop so everybody can see everybody's sheet, so people can work back and forth and be planning ahead and compare and really kind of play to their strengths as well as do the things that are the coolest. They don't just have their own sheet and can't see anybody else's. So that's affiliation die. Distinctions. Distinctions are a really, really core part of Cortex Prime. It's not as clear that it's a core part of Marvel Heroic, but it is. But Cortex Prime really nailed down on that. Distinctions are features of your character. They could be a reputation, they could be a saying, they could be an outlook or a point of view. They might include something like an occupation or a class, like a role, even though that's kind of a little bit different in Cortex because they actually have a set for roles. But it's something that defines your character in some way. And the best distinctions are the distinctions that define your character in a way that can help them and can hinder them. And actually in Cortex Prime, they have the SFX hinder. And the reason I say that, and the reason you can see on the sheets, on the blank data file, it says D4 plus plot point, PP, or a D8, is if it's something that's helping you, then you use it, you add it to your pool as a D8. If it's something that's hindering you, or in some way is preventing you or complicating you or something, then you add it as a D4. But a D4 has a 1 in 4 chance of turning up a 1. So you're kind of, and the best it can do is a 4. So you're kind of nerfing yourself a little bit. So in exchange for that, you get another plot point. And that's a really important way that characters are able to get plot points, is to purposely kind of play against type in a way. So Scott, one of Scott's distinctions might be something like leader of the X-Men, right? So if he's together with the X-Men and they're attacking Sentinels, he could use that distinction as a D8 on his action, because that is what he is doing. He is the team leader of the X-Men, and this is all great for him. If he's trying to avoid being seen in a crowd, everybody kind of knows who the X-Men are, and depending on where you are in the comics, mutants are sometimes looked down upon, then that might count against him because he's got a face. I mean, he's got those bright red ruby quartz glasses. He sticks out in a crowd. So that might work to his disadvantage. So in a case like that, if he's trying to do some action or something where that X-Men team leader would count against him, he would use it as a D4. And that is the same exact thing in Cortex Prime. No matter what you're playing, it works the same exact way. Distinctions do. Okay, so distinctions, and then they have power sets. Power sets are exactly what it sounds like, and there's a million variations because there's a million different characters. But it's essentially a box that has, this is what the powers do, and they have dice ratings for each of the traits. You call them traits. If you look at Gambit, he has Energy Blast, Psychic Resistance, and Enhanced Reflexes, all within his Energy Tap power set. And then he's got SFXs and limits, and those are, like I said, they're basically ways that you define what's going on. So if I was going to use She-Hulk and the Incredible Hulk, right? They both have a lot of the same powers, but the way that they use them and the way that they are manifested in play is oftentimes quite different. So while the power set might have the same, super strength or godlike strength or whatever, the SFXs and the limits are going to kind of refine it a little bit and make it a little more individualized and unique to that character. And that's what they do. And you can read them. There's lots of different ones. Some of them will require plot points being spent. Some of them will just be like a trigger if something happens. As a limit, limits can be triggered by the watcher, by the GM. If something happens, they can say, okay, I'm going to activate your trigger. Iron Man, your armor's going to shut down. Gambit, you're a mutant. This is the mutant, what do they call it? The virus there. Legacy virus. So this is going to affect you. But if the GM's going to do that, if the watcher does that, they have to first say, before I do that, do you as the player want to choose to trigger it? And if you do that, then you get a plot point. So it'll still happen, but if you are doing it willingly, then you are getting a plot point. And you would get to narrate that probably. That's how the game kind of works in general, both Marvel Heroic and Cortex Prime. It shares a lot of the narration. So I might dictate what my characters are doing as the watcher, and then we resolve some kind of action. And then I'll say, okay, tell me, what did Cyclops do as a result of missing that blast? What is his reaction to that? Describe what just happened when he blasted the foot off of the Sentinel. So you roll the dice, you figure out what happened, and then you narrate it. And a lot of times the players are the ones narrating the story, or at least their part in the story. Okay, that's power sets. Specialties are different than powers. Specialties are more like things that the character, it's like skills, like head knowledge, or abilities that they can do, like acrobatics is one of them. You can see Gambit's got combat expert, crime master, covert expert, acrobatic expert. They're either expert, which is a D8, or master, which is a D10. And they can be broken down into two of the next step down. So if you have combat expert, and that's a D8, and for whatever reason, when you're assembling your pool, you go, you know what? I don't need this D8. I need more dice. You would take 2 D6, so you break it down. And the same thing with Master at a D10, you can break it down into 2 D8s to add it into your pool. Just however you want that to work, if that's to your advantage in some way. So that's specialties. You also use specialties to do some other things, which are up in the Nooks and Crannies section, so we're not going to cover it. Milestones, I did already mention. Milestones are how you earn XP. There's a 1 XP trigger, a 3 XP trigger, and a 10 XP trigger. The 1 XP can be hit as many times as it applies. The 3 XP is 1 time per scene, so you can only earn it 1 time in a scene. And then the 10 XP is a 1 time. Once you do that, you either finish with that milestone or you start it over again. So you've accomplished the thing. And that's how you earn XP, and then you can spend XP, and we're not even really going to cover that today, but there's a way that you do that, and you can increase die ratings or swap out distinctions and things like that. You do all the things that XP normally do. And then they have that last section for creating new data files. They have a blank one in the book. There's loads and loads of fan ones. I showed you one that I made. Creating new data files is something that a lot of people like to do, and they shy away from it because in Marvel Heroic you have pre-generated characters, which is fine, but they have their own ideas or their own interpretations, how they want characters to play out. So you can create new data files, and you can do that a number of ways. You can look at what other characters have. You can look at and say, okay, well, so they gave Thor godlike strength, D12, and I want to make a character who's not as strong as Thor, so I'm going to step that down. I'm going to be a D10 for strength. Weather supremacy, well, depending on how you want that to happen, do you want it to be as good as Thor? Do you want it to be better? Do you want it to be like Storm of the X-Men? So you just kind of work at it like that. There is even a random data file generator in the Civil War book, the Civil War handbook. This is the basic book, that picture on the right, or excuse me, on the left. But there was another supplement called Civil War that was published in physical copy, and there are a couple other digital copies of different ones as well. So there's a random data file generator, and it's okay at what it does. Between you and me, I like to use the old Phase Rip, the Marvel Superheroes game from the 80s, with just like loads and loads of powers. I like to randomly generate a character with that system and then convert it to Marvel Heroic, which it isn't complicated. You just look at what it is and kind of compare it around to the other standard characters, canon characters there, and then kind of compare and then do it. It's very loosey-goosey. The whole way that Cortex works is it doesn't get bogged down in mechanics. There's like a core flow. That's what you do, and that. Yeah, okay, Scott's saying we should just shut up and move on. So we're going to move on. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I'm going to do Oh, hey, welcome back. We're going to get right into the playthrough. So if you watched the previous section where I was going through the rules, then this is going to reinforce those. If you already knew those rules, then this is going to also reinforce those and help you see them in action. If you didn't, you won't be too left out. You'll pick up on how this flows pretty quickly. As a bit of a scene setup, I imagine Gambit and Psylocke and Nightcrawler all kind of sitting around a table in the X-Mansion. It's, like a regular Saturday night situation. They're just chilling. They're probably playing a card game. And I feel like they'd want us to think that they were playing poker or some, like, adult game. Probably it was Crazy Eights. But either way, Psylocke gets upset, Gambit gets upset, accusing each other of cheating. Mon chéri, you are cheating! And Psylocke, with her British accent, was like, oi, you bloody wanker, you were cheating. And Nightcrawler, being the pacifist that he is, kind of puts them apart, put hands between them. Please, Fräulein, calm down, right? And in that moment, Gambit's mutant power of changing potential energy into kinetic energy, and Psylocke's power, which is like telepathy and psionics and stuff, and Nightcrawler's power, which is teleportation across dimensions, all kind of gets mingled and mixed together, and they end up being transported to an alternate future or an alternate timeline, which you may be familiar with if you are familiar with the Days of Future Past sort of storyline or arc or incarnation. Basically what happened was sometime in the 80s, there was some, I think Charles Xavier was assassinated, there was some political stuff that went on, and the end result was mutants were outlawed. It became sort of a dystopian, oppressive situation. Sentinels took over North America. All right? So that sounds kind of like a deep and complex and bleak lead up, but I'll tell you that when I was coming up with this, I was thinking Gambit has like pink energy when he does his stuff, and Psylocke has pink energy when she does her stuff, and Nightcrawler oftentimes when he bamfs, there's like red and purple and pink going on. So I feel like that's a natural reason to believe that they would be transported to an alternate future timeline where where North America is ruled by giant pink and purple robots. I think it's an obvious connection. I don't know how magic works, but I assume it's based on colors like that. So so that's kind of our setup. So they have just been teleported. They've dropped into sort of an urban ruins kind of a situation. It's nighttime, and there are law enforcement officials as well as a sentinel sort of towering. They're as tall as a building. If you're not familiar with what a sentinel is, it's a giant robot sort of towering over the scene, and they're crowded around sort of a broken down apartment building. There's something going on, and these three kind of appear in not necessarily too far away, but unnoticed for the moment, in sort of the classic how'd we get here kind of moment. In terms of Roll20 setup, visually, I tend to do things a little bit different with my players. When I'm running everything like this by myself, I've made some shortcuts. What I would typically do is have pictures, visuals that represent that stuff, and then I fade them in, move them from the GM layer, which is hidden to the players, move them to a layer that's seen by the players, kind of step by step, which is really cool if you've been in my games. I really enjoy doing it. I assume it works. Nobody's complained. I just really think he thinks it's cool too. So we're gonna get in with it. I have tokens down here on the screen for need to act for the action round. We're in action round now. I also have, so I can move these tokens once I move. I'll go down here, and then we'll just move everybody up and we'll reset. I have some extra plot points out on the table. Each character data file has a plot point already. You've got your enemies up there, and then I also included on the very left-hand side in my games, I typically include this graphic. I cannot take credit for it. I don't remember where I found it. I just remember the first time I played, the GM was using it, and I thought that is a really fantastic way to have a visual to just how do you assemble your dice pool. And you can see it here if I scroll just a little bit more. You can see it's got the steps. You pick your affiliation die, you pick a distinction die, your power set, second power set if you have one, your specialty. If your opponent has stress on them, you can include that die in your pool. If your opponent has a complication on them, you can include that die in your pool. If you have any assets, you can include those in your pool. And then the push, stunt, and resource, if they happen, they happen. It's a nook and cranny thing again. I'm not going to worry about explaining too much there. And then if there's any other extra dice that would come from some of your SFXs or anything else that's going on in the scene, you put it all together, and that's how you assemble your pool. So you say what you want to do clearly, you assemble your pool, you roll it, and you resolve it. Let's go. To begin with, since they've sort of teleported in without being seen, I'm going to let the players go first. This is going to be weird because I'm also the players. But I'm going to let the players go first, and we're going to go right down the road. Boom, boom, boom. You can see on the screen I have two scene distinctions as well, Urban Ruins and Dystopian Night, because I misspelled dystopian. So let me just go ahead and fix that real quick. Dystopian Night is definitely what I meant. And now it doesn't fit on the nice thing. That's okay. We know what it says. Switch back. It's Dystopian Night. Scene distinctions are an option for anybody. If you're looking at your distinctions and you're like, I don't think any of these work for me one way or the other as a D8 or a D4, you can do the same thing with scene distinctions. So you can say, oh, well, I'm going to use the Dystopian Night as a scene distinction, as the distinction to help me either as a D8 or hinder me as a D4. So they're just like free-for-all distinctions. And then underneath that you see the Doom Pool. It's currently at 2d6. It will grow as we go. I think that's it. That's all you really need to know. You can pause and read the data files as we go, but let's get into it. So we'll start with Gambit. The three of them are kind of like a city block away, maybe, right? And Gambit sees what's going on. Now these are X-Men. These guys know what Sentinels are about, but this is not their neighborhood. They've just kind of come back from the teleport. And Gambit seeing the scene that's going on kind of indicates to the other two, like, hey, this looks fishy to me, right? I'm really good with accents. And they all kind of agree, so they decide to creep in a little bit closer, and Gambit knows that Sentinels are pretty much bad guys wherever they are. Some of the ruins maybe look a little bit familiar, maybe look a little Manhattan-y, right? But it's clear that there's something bad going on. So Gambit decides he's not going to wait. He's kind of impulsive. He's actually still really mad because Psylocke was cheating. She's a telepath. She was cheating at the card game. Gambit suspects that anyway, and he's kind of impulsive in the moment. Another day he would have been maybe a little sneakier, but this time he's going to take the initiative, and he's just going to attack the Sentinel, the Alpha Sentinel. So he's going to, we're going to say what we're going to do clearly, right? He's going to try to deal physical stress to the Alpha Sentinel, and he's going to do that by throwing his playing cards at them, or at it. Charge him up and throw him. Classic Gambit move. So I'll zoom in just a little bit so you can see Gambit's card. By the way, these data files, these 3 data files for the heroes are all from Marvel Plot Points. Again, if you didn't watch before, I have the link in the description. Great resource, great site, great crew, and a lot of really cool data files. They have villain ones, they have item sets and things like that. All right, so Gambit. So we're going to build our pool to have Gambit attack the Sentinel to deal physical stress with his playing cards. So we're going to go that, and we're going to type it over here in the chat. So we have, he's not really acting as a team in this moment. This is sort of an impulsive thing. So we're going to go /R space 1d8 space. This is how you do it in Roll20. So that's his solo affiliation die. In terms of his distinctions, you have Cajun Casanova, Master Thief, Shady Past, and then you have the other 2 scene distinctions, the Urban Ruins and the Dystopian Nights. I feel like Master Thief, this is not a Master Thief move, right? We literally have described this as being impulsive. By the way, I have none of this planned. I'm just going off the top of my head. So I don't know how much sense it's going to make, but it'll be okay. But it doesn't feel like a Master Thief, does it, to run out and be impulsive. So I'm going to use Master Thief as a D4 and gain myself a plot point. So I'm going to go 1D4 space plus space, and then I'm actually going to come over here and grab a plot point and give him another plot point. And then we'll move to Energy Tap power set. So this is Energy Blast, right? I mean, that's how it's being capitalized or captured here in this data file. So it's going to be Energy Blast. Now, I could do the area attack and target multiple opponents. I could do Unleashed, which means I could step up the D10 Energy Blast to a D12, but if I fail, then I would add a D10. I add a die to the Doom Pool equal to the normal rating, which is a D10. I would add a D10 into the Doom Pool, which I feel also like kind of sort of applies here because he's not really thinking ahead. So we're going to use the Unleash. So we're going to step up that Energy Blast, which would normally be a D10, and we're going to add it in as a D12. By the way, you can use as many SFXs as apply as you want to use, and you don't have to use any of them. It's totally your choice. Immunity doesn't matter, and then the lose control and the mutant limits, they don't matter right now. The telescoping bow, we're not really using that as a in what we're doing here, so I'm not going to bother with anything from that. Combat expert, covert expert certainly doesn't apply. Acrobatic expert, no, we're just kind of running in hot-headed a little bit. Crime master, that doesn't apply, but combat expert applies. I mean, he's fought sentinels before, right? So we're gonna go 1d8. Do we have anything else? We don't have assets. We don't have any stress on the enemy or complication on the enemy. We don't have anything else like that that contributes to our die pool. So this is what we got. We got a d8, a d4, a d12, and a d8, and we'll roll it. What you will notice as we proceed is that I'm really great at rolling ones. I'm a fantastic GM in that regard. So I've rolled a 1 on one of the d8s, as you can see. I can no longer use that die for anything, so it kind of gets set aside. I have the 2, the 5, and the 2, right? So I can add the 5 and one of the 2s to make a total of 7, and then have the other die be an effect die. So can I do the thing on this? No, I can't. But I can, well, you can see my cursor. So as in terms of my 2 dice for a total, I can add the 5 and probably add this 2 for a total of 7 with a d8 effect, all right? I could do that. That's not a really high total, though. So it's very unlikely to succeed. But, to be fair, this is the opening volley. He's being kind of impulsive. It probably shouldn't succeed a whole lot. So that's fine. We'll go ahead and do that, but it does kind of work against him. So he's going to choose a total of 7. And I like to write it down in the chat when people are talking. I like to have either them or I will write down what it is, what's the final answer. So a total of d7 with a d8 effect to deal physical stress to this Alpha Sentinel. Oh, and he rolled a 1. Okay, yeah, this is kind of weird. So Gambit rolled a 1. I, as the Watcher, will buy that opportunity from him. If it was in Cortex Prime, you would call it a hitch, but it's the same dynamic, same mechanic. So I, as the Watcher, am going to give him another plot point. Drag another plot point onto his data file, and then I will add another d6 into the Doom pool. Okay? Which I can use like plot points. So we come over to the Alpha Sentinel. Now these 3 red ones, these data files, I have actually made because I kind of always tinker with this idea of running a Days of Future Past game. So I kind of have these. They're not super complicated or sophisticated, but so that was Gambit's action. Now we're going to have the Alpha Sentinel give a reaction with all of its applicable dice. So it is alone. It's the only Sentinel standing there. Nobody else is able to help him dodge or anything like that. So /R 1d8 for the solo. Distinctions, this one has 2 distinctions, Superior Model and Mutant Hunter. I feel like Superior Model probably works best because that's going to represent the fact that they maybe have a little bit more armor than the normal run-of-the-mill Sentinels that Gambit is probably used to dealing with. So we're going to go with a d8 distinction there for Superior Model. In terms of the power set, it's just that one power set: superhuman strength, superhuman durability, the senses, the energy blasts, and the flight. Obviously, durability is the one that's going to be the most applicable to this pool, so we'll throw that in, and that's a d10. And there is an SFX that they can do an area attack, doesn't apply, and they have a limit, which also doesn't apply here. So it's just 3 dice. Now, if I wanted, as the Watcher, I could take some of those Doom dice that I have in the Doom pool and add them in here. They don't come back. I would be spending them to do that, but I could buff things up. But 3 dice, it's the Sentinel. They're supposed to get blown up in the end anyway. This will work. And I'm only competing with a total of 10. So you're going to notice that I'm a really great Watcher in the fact that I roll lots of 1s. Have I said that? But this is good. This is a good situation because it gives us the opportunity to do a couple different things. 1, the active player, the active agent, wins ties. So right now, if they tied in their total, Gambit would still win. All right. In Cortex Prime, things get a little bit different. There's a little bit of a difference because you have tests and contests that you don't really so much have in Marvel Heroic. But for Marvel Heroic purposes, you're really trying to, if you were the active player, if you're taking the action, you want to tie or get better. and Gambit had rolled a 10. The Sentinel, I would discard this 1 for a second, set that aside. I look at my 7 and my 4, and I have to take that as my total. If you would normally need 3 dice, right? 2 for your total and then 1 for your effect. If you only have 2 dice, they have to be your total, and then you just have a D4 effect die, like comes out of the ether. It's just sort of the default thing. If you only have 1 die, then that becomes your total, and you would get a D4 for your effect. So you can always have a D4 if you don't have enough dice, which sometimes happens, especially if you roll a lot of 1s. So in this case, we end up with a total of 11, and we do have a D4 effect. Oops. So Gambit's action did not succeed in dealing physical stress to the Alpha Sentinel. The cards kind of did their but it was more like a ting, 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 because this is not the normal armor that we're used to. But now they are aware that there's someone down the street. The Sentinel is aware. The law enforcement is aware. Probably they were doing an arrest, a mutant arrest. They were probably hunting them out. Mutant hounds are mutants that have sort of been brainwashed to work for the Sentinels and with the police to find them, like errant, escaped mutants. SWAT AM team, SWAT anti-mutant team, and then they're being accompanied by an Alpha Sentinel. This is like a raid to capture a suspected mutant. So that's what they were there for. But they are now aware that Gambit is there. Gambit's attack failed. The Sentinel rolled a 1. The first thing that happens is I, as the watcher, say to Gambit, the player, I have rolled an opportunity. Do you want to spend a plot point to activate that opportunity? And this gets into the stunts and assets, nooks and crannies bit. It's something you can do. Basically, the way to describe it would be I am activating, Gambit is activating that opportunity, or that hitch for Cortex language, and would benefit by getting a D10 stunt, because anytime, one of the things you can do with a plot point is use a plot point on your turn to add a D8 into your dice pool, and it's called a stunt. It represents the fact that you're using your powers in a really cool way. If you do this on an opportunity, if Gambit spends a plot point right now to activate the opportunity that the Watcher rolled, then that stunt gets stepped up to a D10. So Gambit would essentially have a D10 like hanging out on his data file that he could use in the future as a cool application of his power that he could add into his pool. It's just a one shot, but it's kind of like a neat stunt that he could do. He has 3 plot points. So actually, I'm saying that, and I feel like 3 plot points is really awesome. So he's going to do that. So what he's going to do is, we'll scroll over. Actually, I can zoom out. He's going to spend a plot point back, and he's going to get, if I go to text, where is text? Text, contrail, white, I think 20 is good. We're going to give him a power stun. And we're going to give him a power stun. Usually, you're supposed to name it when you create it. If you can't come up with anything fancy, I usually don't push it and just come up with something fancy later on in terms of a name. But we'll name it right now, and we're going to name it... we're going to name it... No, you know what? I have a couple different ideas all competing right now. I'm not going to commit to it. I'm just going to call it Stunt D10. And we'll find out how we want to use that later on. Okay, so that was an action and a reaction. The action failed, but now the bad guys are aware. So we're going to move Gambit's token down because he has already acted. And then Gambit chooses who goes next. Gambit is played by BWS2K. So is Psylocke, Nightcrawler, and the bad guys. So narratively, it makes sense for the bad guys to go next, the Watcher characters to go next. So I'm going to have them go next. And it makes sense because they just saw the arrival of these new mutants, right? So I think the response from the Alpha Sentinel is going to be like in that Sentinel voice, like, mutant detected, Gambit, Remy LeBeau, error. Trying to figure out, because his records say that Gambit is dead. In this timeline, Gambit is dead, and accounted for. And all of a sudden, this is definitely Gambit. And so he probably adds in something like chronal anomaly detected, right? Because that's what Sentinels, they can detect chronal anomalies, I guess. So now it's the Watcher characters. They all go together at the same time. So we'll have the Sentinel act first because it makes the most sense, and then we'll have the SWAT team and the Mutant Hound. So the Sentinel is probably just makes the most sense for him to fire his own energy blasts, right? Because they have energy emitter things in their hands, right? So he's probably going to go ahead and do that. But as he turns and sees that there's more than just Gambit, I think he's going to go ahead and try to hit all of them. So he's going to use his area effect SFX, which always trips people up the first time because of the way it's worded. But it's very easy. We'll walk through it. We'll have him do that. And actually, you know what? Yeah, that's what we're going to do. I'm trying to think of how I want to teach as well as play through this, right? So he's going to assemble his pool. The Alpha Sentinel is /R. He's solo again. 1d8. His distinction, definitely Mutant Hunter. I mean, he is designed for one purpose. It is designed for one purpose, and that is combating, capturing mutants. Mutant Hunter, 1d8. In terms of power traits, Energy Blast makes sense. 1d10. Now, the area attack. It says add a d6 and keep an additional effect die for each additional target. I'm pretty sure Cortex Prime has this. They call it something else, but it's worded almost identically. So the target is Gambit. There are 2 additional targets. So I'm going to add in 2d6. So I'm going to go plus space 2d6. And when it comes to keeping the effect dice, I'm actually going to choose 3 effect dice. Now, if I roll more 1s and stuff, then I default to d4s for any other effect dice that I have. But the goal here is this action is going to require 3 reactions. They're each going to have their own chance to react against that single total. Okay, so let's see, we've got that, and we did the SFX. The limit doesn't matter. There are no assets. Gambit doesn't have any complications or anything on him that can be used. Nobody does. So that's fine. So that's what we'll roll. Oh, I won, but it's not a bad roll either. So we've got 5, 5, a 9, and a 2. I can't use the 1. D4 stress is always just kind of like a weird thing. Okay, so let's do this. If I have a Doom Pool die, right, just call them Doom die, that equals the size of the die that I've rolled, I can spend it and keep extra die. Let me give you an example. If I chose the 9 and one of the 5s, and I was like, oh, I want to keep a 3rd dice, because that's what plot points do. Doom die do the same thing. That 3rd die that I keep can't be the other 5. Because that's a D8, and I don't have any D8s in the Doom pool. I could, though, spend one of my Doom dice and keep the 2, because the 2 is a D6. But I think a 14 is significant enough, so we're going to go with a total of 14. We're going to add the 9 in one of those 5s, and then there's going to be a D8 effect, and that's going to be towards Gambit. There's going to be... So the 2, I can still use that 2, but it's just a D6. A D6 effect on Psylocke. And I'm going to have it be just a default D4 effect to Nightcrawler, which makes sense from the standpoint of it's nighttime, and one of his abilities is shadow blending. So he is probably, even though the Sentinel can see him, it's probably most difficult to hit Nightcrawler of the 3 of them. You know, it's kind of his deal. He moves around and is agile and nimble, but also at nighttime he has like a partial invisibility kind of thing going on. So that's how we're going to do it. We're going to do a total of 14. Do that. Now he did roll a 1, so then it goes out to the table. Does anyone want to spend a plot point to buy that 1? Gambit already has a stunt die. He's not going to buy a second one. Psylocke and Nightcrawler do not want to spend their only plot point. That may come in handy for them later. So they're going to hang on to what they have, and that's totally fine. When you roll a hitch, when you roll an opportunity, it doesn't have to get bought. It just kind of goes away. And in Cortex Prime, when you roll hitches, you usually add in narratively how you've failed in some way. Not so much in Marvel Heroic. It's just, it's a 1, it's an opportunity. Use it, don't use it, whatever. Okay, so let's go down the line. Gambit's going to react to this energy blast, which is going to be dealing physical stress. And he's going to try to roll this 14. So we'll go through his sheet again. He is acting solo because he's kind of... I have this idea of him kind of being ahead of the other two, right? Because he ran out and did that. So we have a 1d8 solo. And then for his distinctions, I'm actually going to go ahead and use Urban Ruins to represent the fact that he's going to try to dodge this. He's kind of like dodging behind some broken down concrete, reinforced concrete, maybe like a rusted out old car or something like that. So he's actually going to try to dodge this, duck for cover under something. I hope I'm still in the camera. I don't have my display up. But at any rate, that's what he's going to try to do. So I'm actually going to use the Urban Ruins scene distinction as a d8 for him. Oops, 1d8. So that's affiliation, distinction, energy tap. Energy tap does have enhanced reflexes, which definitely helps here. So we're going to throw a 1d8 in there. Immunity. Immunity may actually happen here. Oh no, it's a psychic attack only. Alright, so he couldn't use any of those things. Telescoping bow has durability, so if he was trying to block it with his bow, I would allow maybe the enhanced durability here. But he's not really doing that. It's not even out. He's just rolling for cover. So that's not going to matter. Combat expert. Acrobatic. This is acrobatic expert, I think. He's doing an acrobatic move, so we're going to give him the d8 for that. And he has no other assets. That stunt die is something he uses on an action, so we're good. So this is his reaction. There is a pattern here. Do you want to play in my games yet? Do you want to win in my games yet? I roll hitches for days, folks. Okay, so he did get an 8, though, and we're trying to beat a 14. Unfortunately, he is no longer the acting player, right? He's not the active agent, so he doesn't win ties. So he can do a 14 with a d8 effect. Whew. So, and he's got 2 plot points, so he'll go ahead and spend a plot point. So what we'll do is we'll have him spend a plot point to keep a 3rd total die, right? So we'll add the 6 and the 8 and the 3 for a total of 17. With just a d4 effect. And that's nothing amazing. He won the energy blast. I was thinking originally maybe he'd duck behind like a corner of a building or something like that, but I like the fact that there's like maybe a burnt out car or something like that. So I think he ducked behind that and it hit the sort of roof of the car and blew the roof, peeled it right off and it went flying, but Gambit's okay and there's, smoke and debris there. So Gambit's fine. We'll move to Psylocke. Psylocke, if you haven't seen her sheet yet, because sometimes my YouTube videos get pixelated, so I hope you can see it. Again, if you can't, just go to marvelplotpoints.com. You can get your own copy. It's great. Do it. Psylocke, Betsy Braddock. So she is being attacked by this energy blast. Similarly, she is also going to just kind of duck for cover. Now, the way I pictured it was that they were kind of a city block away. There is a building, so she's going to duck like behind the corner of the building. Oops, fix my mouse here. So she's gonna roll 1d8 solo. Posh, trained by the hand and body swapped. Trained by the hand makes sense. I mean, I could use Urban Ruins too, but trained by the hand makes sense. The hand is like a bunch of ninjas, so this is not anything like too complicated for her. Stand behind a building, right? Not any major training. Oops, 1d8 for that. Then we go to telepath. None of these telepath things really make any sense here, so we're not going to worry about that. Assassin training, however, we have enhanced reflexes like Gambit does. So we'll add that 1d8 in. Let's see, focus. Replace 2 dice of equal steps with 1 die of 1 step. So I could combine 2 d8s into 1 d10. Not really sure that helps here. Oh, but we have second wind. That second SFX there, that second wind, says before you make an action including an assassin training power, which we are, enhanced reflexes, you may move your physical stress die to the doom pool and then step up the assassin training power by 1. Well, that's great, but we actually don't have any physical stress. So that wouldn't apply. That's not something we can do. And then let's go with combat expert, not acrobatic expert, only because combat expert, we use trained by the hand. This is battle instinct taking over, right? And we got a D8, D8, D8. I said like 100,000 D8s. You need them, right? Okay. Again, we've got a very clear pattern, and she's looking to beat a 14, and she does that easily with the 2 D8s. So she's got a total of 16, and she has a D8 effect. The effect on a reaction. Let's pause for a minute and talk about that just briefly. It generally won't matter if you succeed. Okay, so like she's got a 16. The 16 beats the 14 that the Sentinel has, so her effect die doesn't really mean anything. However, one thing you can do is if her total had been, let's say, 12 and she had lost, but if her effect die was higher, like the size was higher than the effect that's being sent to her. So for instance, the Sentinel for her is trying to deal D6 physical stress. Well, her D8 effect die is bigger than the D6, so it steps the D6 down to a D4. Even though she lost in terms of the totals, she had a bigger effect die, and that actually steps down the sort of incoming effect die. So it is a little bit of reprieve in that sense. That's one thing, and there's no plot points involved or anything. That's just the mechanic. However, another use of plot points, and a common use of plot points, I would say, is you can spend a plot point to use your effect die on a reaction as a sort of counterattack to inflict that effect die as a complication or stress or whatever on the acting agent. So if I wanted to, I mean, it narratively doesn't make sense. She's ducking behind a building, so I'm not really sure how a counterattack would happen. But maybe I describe it as she's ducking behind this building, and the Sentinel fires the energy blast at her, and let's say her total was a 12 and she was losing, or even if it's a 16, you can still do it if you win. Like, I could still do this. It's separate from whether you win or lose or succeed or fail. I could spend a plot point and then deal D8 stress back, or D8 complication. Like maybe he shoots and hits like a gas main or something and it blows up in his face, or it creates a bunch of debris clouds, and so now there's a complication on him that his sensors aren't working as well, and it would become a D8, scrambled sensors, D8 explosion in my face, whatever. Or it could just be D8 mental stress or something like that. But I'm not going to do that. Plot points, if you have one, it's good to keep it until you really need it, and she definitely doesn't need it right now, and it's the opening volley, so we're not going to worry about that. So Psylocke is fine. And then finally we come over to Nightcrawler. Good old Kurt. He's probably going to run too. So Psylocke is running behind the building. Kurt, I think, is he's a teleporter, so his natural instinct, even though it's nighttime and even though he's fought Sentinels before, his natural instinct is actually going to be teleport, right? That's what he does. So I think he's going to teleport to the top of a nearby building as well. Or not as well, but like staying in the area, but just poof, teleport, bamf, right? So his reaction roll is solo, D8, plus we have Pious, we have Circus Freak, we have Swashbuckler, but we also have Urban Ruins as a scene distinction, and I think that's what I'm going to use. I could also use the Dystopian Knight, as I did before, to kind of represent the fact that he's shadow blending kind of a little bit, but either way, I'm going to go with Urban Ruins because he's specifically teleporting to a better location. So we're going to throw a 1d8 in from that. Mutation, obviously, is going to be teleport. If he had been dodging, I would have used Superhuman Reflexes, which is a bigger die, and that's kind of one of the pieces of both Cortex and Marble Heroic is sometimes you're thinking, I want the best die, I want to optimize, I want the biggest, most advantageous thing, which is fine. Play to your character's strengths. However, if you're doing that, then sometimes the story gets static, right? You want it to be a little bit exciting. It's okay to do things that maybe your character wouldn't do the best. All right, so in this case, I'm using Teleport, which is a D8. He does have the Bamf Boost SFX down here. I keep pointing to my monitor, but I could just use my mouse. Bamf Boost, where I could step up Teleport to a D10 for this single action, and then I would take that die as physical stress. So there's no reason for me to take D10 physical stress right away. Like, that's not a good first move in a scene, right? So he's just going to teleport. Those things don't so much matter. The sword set doesn't really matter. Combat expert matters more. I think it's not acrobatic. He's not jumping. He's teleporting. But he's, again, used to battle. So we'll throw combat expert in there. So that's a 1d8. So he's only got 3 dice going into his pool. He could spend a plot point to... I think one of the things you can spend a plot point for is to add in an additional one. Don't quote me on that. Again, it's very nooks and cranny-ish, and I don't know how it translates to Cortex in terms of them. I would have to check in the book, which I'm not going to do. So we're going to be risky. We're just going to roll these 3 and see how it goes. If history teaches us anything, I'm only going to be able to use 2 of them. Hey, not too bad, Kurt. I didn't roll a 1. So he's trying to beat a 14, and he does that easily with the 8 and the 7 for a total of 15, and then a d8 effect. So the energy blast hits where he was, right? And pulverizes the dirt, but he is not there. There is only a cloud and the slight stench of sulfur and brimstone, right? And he bamps up to the top of the roof. So that was a reaction, because the Sentinel used the area attack, SFX. So that's fine, everybody's still good, and then we come over and we're going to let the other people go now. We have the SWAT team and the Mutant Hound. Now, the Mutant Hound will be interesting. I included the Mutant Hound. They're not really combat capable. That's not what they do. They track mutants, but they do have a psychic resistance, and we do have Psylocke on our team. So it will be interesting to see how they kind of interact a bit. So the Mutant Hound, I think, is actually going to do what's called a support action, which is where you just take a die. Let me describe it clearly. As a watcher, you can have a watcher character lend a support die to another watcher character, and that's their turn. So the Mutant Hound is actually just going to give the superhuman senses to the SWAT team to represent the fact that the Mutant Hound is like pointing them out. You know, the Sentinel has sensors and scanners and stuff and was directly attacked. Those guys down on the ground, they weren't paying attention. They're not sure what's going on, even though they're aware that something's going on. The Mutant Hound is going to point them in the right direction to where Gambit just ducked behind the car and Psylocke just went behind the thing, right? So they are going to get a die from the Mutant Hound. So the only thing that the Mutant Hound is doing for the Mutant Hound's turn, their action, is going to be to give a Superhuman Senses D10 to the SWAT AM team. When you have player characters who want to do that for each other, they actually do build the dice pool like normal, roll it, and then they give the effect die to their ally. So there is a little bit of an opportunity. There's the chance that they could roll a 1. If that could be opposed in any way by the Watcher, they might roll the Doom pool against it or something. It's a little bit different. When it's Watcher characters helping other Watcher characters, they just give them the die. So that's what we've got going here. So that's their turn. They're going to give, so I'm going to type it in before we forget, /R, 1d10 to represent the fact that the Mutant Hound is pointing out the location of the mutants to the SWAT team. Now the SWAT team, if you look at them, you'll notice they're set up a little bit differently as well. They're what we call a mob. They don't act individually. They don't act, in this case, they don't act as a buddy. They don't act in pairs. They act as a coordinated team. Now they have 3 d8s. It doesn't mean there's only 3 of them. It just means that there's 3 d8 worth of them. All right? So they roll all 3 of those dice when they're acting as a team. When you stress them out, you're actually stressing out those team dice because you're making the team smaller. All right, and you'll see that, hopefully you'll see that as things go on. I don't want to be too talky here. I need to be able to show you all this stuff in a reasonable amount of time. So they have a d10 from the Mutant Hound. Then they assemble their dice because they are going to open fire. They've got like laser rifles. They're going to open fire on, probably on Psylocke, not Psylocke, but on Gambit, because he's behind a car. He's not, you know, like they can see him, not see him, he's behind it, but like, we don't know where Psylocke went. We're not going to shoot lasers through a building, and you know, Kurt teleported, so they don't necessarily see him, but they do. They can see where Gambit is, so they're going to do that. They don't have area attack. I thought about giving them area attack, but it didn't really fit, so it's fine. So they're going to attack Gambit. So they're going to deal physical stress, hope to deal physical stress to Gambit with their laser rifles. So they get 3d8s for their affiliation. Distinctions, they have coordinated, committed, and well-trained. We're going to go with coordinated because they're acting in tandem with the Hound and with each other. So that's a d8. Not an 87. For their power is the d8, the weapon. And then focus. So check this out. It says, if a pool includes a SWAT AM team power, which is what the enhanced durability in the weapon is, you may replace 2 dice of equal size with 1 step larger, which is the BAMF boost, part of the BAMF boost that Nightcrawler has. Except they don't have to take stress for it. They can just do it. And as it turns out, because they've got 3, 4, 5 d8s, we're going to use it to make this, hopefully, a much more successful attack. So we've got 5 d8s, so I'm going to take 4 of them, and I'm going to combine 2 d8s into a d10 and 2 d8s into a d10. So I'm going to erase that, and I'm going to go 2d10. Oops. So we've got a d10, 2d10, and a d8, which doesn't really matter how you group them. And there's no complications, there's no assets or anything else in play here, so this is what it is. Yeah, that's a good roll. So they're going to have a total of 19, and they're going to choose that 2, which is just a d10, as their effect die. So they've got a total of 19, which is really good, and effect of d10 effects for physical stress on Gambit. That's really good. Gambit gets to react to this. There's no limit to how many times you can react. It's just, it is what it is. He is all alone. 1d8. Hopefully you kind of see how this goes, right? You're getting the flow of it. You just assemble, act, react, assemble, react. Okay. So he's got 1d8 from being solo. Shady Pass, Master Thief, Cajun Casanova, Urban Ruins. I'm going to go Urban Ruins, but I'm going to use it as a d4. No, I'll use it as d8. He needs all the help he can get. Because he is hiding still behind the Urban Ruins. The fact that there's this car here, though it has been already partially destroyed by time and the Alpha Sentinel. So I'm hoping that this is going to represent the fact that the lasers will just, ping, ping, ping. Will it work? I don't know. So that's the affiliation and the distinction. Energy Blast or Energy Tap. Enhanced reflexes. Enhanced reflexes, we'll add that in here. I think it maybe represents the fact that he's just really good at dodging even if he's behind a car. I mean, these lasers are presumably coming through the car chassis and stuff like that. If they fail, it doesn't mean that they totally missed Gambit, like they were shooting in the wrong car. It just means they didn't land a hit on him enough to deal an effect. He's still being shot at. Like, that's the story. That's the panel that's happening. So we'll include enhanced reflexes. There's nothing really going on with telescoping bow. Again, we could do enhanced durability, like maybe he was spinning it around or something like that, but I don't know that he would take the time to do that. He's being fired upon. But we'll go with, let's see, we have combat expert, covert expert, acrobatic expert. Well, since we're using enhanced reflexes, let's keep using acrobatic expert. Before I even roll, okay, take a look at what we got. If you pick 2 dice for your total and a third for your effect, the total coming in is a 19. So as it is, 2 d8s, the best they can do is a 16, right? So while I could use my plot point maybe to do something fun right now, looking at the dice that I'm about to roll, I am almost certainly going to fail. If I can keep that plot point and then spend it after I've rolled, it may be possible to add a third die into my total and beat the 19. Maybe. So we're going to roll the 4 d8s here. Oh, an 8 helps. And a 4 gives us only 12. And even if I spend a plot point to keep the 3 or the 2, that doesn't get us to the point where the 19 isn't going to hurt us. But it does do something important, which is if you have an action that is 5 more, the total is 5 or more greater than your reaction total, then the effect from that total steps up. So as it is right now, I have Gambit choose 12, the 8 and the 4. That's against the total of 19. The 19 comes with a D10 effect. The 19 is more than 5, or 5 or more, greater than the 12 that Gambit would have, which would step up the SWAT team's D10 effect to a D12 effect. So it not only succeeds, it heroically succeeds. It's a heroic success, which is language used both in Marvel Heroic and in Cortex Prime. And it's that way for every group of 5. If it was 10 or more, then you would step up the effect die twice. So I'm going to, as Gambit, spend my plot point to keep the 3 for a total of 15, because the difference between 19 and 15 is not going to give the SWAT team a heroic success. They'll still succeed, but they won't succeed with a heroic success. So their D10 effect stays a D10 effect as physical stress to Gambit. Okay, so that's what we'll do. We'll move this away, take off his plot point, and we'll do 12 plus the 3 for a total of 15 with a D8 effect. The result is Gambit's going to take D10 physical stress. So let's come over here, get to text, contrail, and I guess, oh right, we can do the X. So I actually, with Roll20, just take an X like this. Yeah. And I type an X in one of the fonts. I copy, and I come over here and I paste. Oh, I guess I pasted it right there. And I'll just drag it over. So he's at D10 physical stress. All right. That's not so great, but it could have been D12. All right. So that was the Alpha Sentinel went with the area attack. The Mutant Hound gave the support action to the SWAT team, and then the SWAT team acted to attack Gambit. So all the reactions were taken care of. So now BWS2K as the Watcher has done their turn. My turn? His turn? Pick a pronoun. I will choose Nightcrawler to go next. So, because I'm really kind of like holding out that Betsy's going to do something really cool and like stealthy ninja-y. Actually, what I want her to do on her turn is like do the Psy Blade and like tackle the Hound, because I want to see like the psychic stuff going back and forth. I think it will still ultimately work out to Psylocke's advantage, but I think it's just kind of cool. But anyway, so we've got Nightcrawler up on the roof. He's going to take his action. What does he want to do? I mean, he doesn't have... He's got his sword. He could attack the Sentinel, which feels like maybe not so much, right? And he can teleport. Maybe the best thing for him to do is to attack the SWAT team and try and tie them up, you know, sort of hinder their efforts. There's a group of them. That feels like that would be the thing that... Yeah, no, Scott agrees. That's a very Kurt Wagner thing to do. So let's do that. So we're going to have him... His goal is going to be to create a complication. So we're not going to deal stress, but we're going to create a complication on the SWAT team. Now, even though it's a complication and not stress, if it steps up past a certain point, it can stress them out, I think. I'm honestly not sure at the moment, but we'll see. We'll roll with him, see how it goes. But his goal is going to be to put a complication on the SWAT team by sort of like teleporting in a chain, like poof, 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 to confuse them. And of course, there's a little bit of smoke and the stench, and they're not going to know what's going on. I mean, they know a little bit about... They're an anti-mutant group, right? So they're used to dealing with mutants, but this one's supposed to be dead. And he's good at what he does. So he's going to be like in front of them, teasing them, you know, maybe landing a couple punches, kicks, nothing to deal with physical stress, but just causing them to be distracted. So his goal is going to be to put a complication on the team. So we're going to assemble a pool for that. /R space. He is doing this alone. And I think Pious, Circus Freak, Swashbuckler. Yeah, let's use Swashbuckler, because he's got his sword. I kind of had mentioned that he's got his sword. So he's like parrying their weapons as well. Again, he's not really stabbing them, but he's just kind of causing chaos, right? So we'll give him his Swashbuckler and a D8. Mutation obviously is going to be teleport. And I could almost see superhuman reflexes in here. Okay, yeah, let's use the multi-power SFX. It says use 2 or more mutation powers in a single die pool, but you got to step them back. So let's do that. Let's go teleport and superhuman reflexes, but they're each going to be stepped down. So teleport is actually going to be a D6, and superhuman reflexes is actually going to be a D8, just for fun. Don't care about the rest. We'll throw in the sword, D8. And he has focus. In a pool including a sword die, which is what this pool is, replace 2 die of equal steps with 1 die of +1 step. And I might be counteracting myself here, but that's okay. So let's take 2 of the D8s that we have now, bump them together, and make a D10. And then lastly, we're going to throw in Acrobatic Master, because this isn't about dealing stress. This isn't so much combat. It's kind of what he does. Bob, weave, poke, teleporting, right? So we're going to throw in the D10. Oops, not a D0. D10. Yeah, that's cool. To do a complication on the SWAT team. Okay, that's not the worst thing ever. We've got a 5, 6, a couple 6s. So if we choose the D6 6, all right, and we choose one of the D10 6s, that's a total of 12. We can use the other D10 as the complication, as the effect. So let's do D10 effect. The question is, they're going to be rolling 3 D8s plus the other stuff that they have. So it's probable that they are going to get a 12 or more. So I'm actually going to have Nightcrawler spend his plot point. I'm not even going to move it all the way over. I'm just going to move it up. And he's going to keep the 5 as well. So he's keeping the 5, he's keeping the D6 6, and he's keeping one of the D10 6s for a total of 17. That seems much more reasonable. And we'll keep it that way. And then he did roll an opportunity. So I, as the GM, am going to give him a plot point, and then I'm going to actually, instead of adding another die to my die pool, I'm going to step up the lowest in my die pool, which is going to be one of the D6s. And now my Doom pool is 2d6 and 1, whoops, let's be consistent, 1d8. So that was what he did. So now that was his action. We come over to the SWAT team, and they're going to get a reaction. So they're going to get their 3 D8s. And we're going to go with well-trained as a D8 for them as well. Enhanced durability. I feel like enhanced durability here is representing the fact that they have armor, some of which includes probably gas masks. So I think I would allow the enhanced durability to come into play here, even though it's not a physical stress situation, like in terms of what you would typically think of durability as. I think there is a sense of durability in the fact that their equipment allows them to hopefully be, to remain focused even in this sort of chaos. So I would allow that. So I have 3 D8s plus a D8 plus another D8. If a pool includes a SWAT team power, which it does, I can replace 2 dice with 1 larger. So I'll do that again. I'll take those 2 D8s from the enhanced durability and from the well-trained, and I'll combine them into a D10 just to hedge my bets here. Let's see what we do. So we're trying to beat a 17, and I am not going to spend any Doom die. I'm not going to spend any Doom dice on this. Good grief. Playing against yourself, man. It's wild. So I'm actually going to allow this to occur. I'm going to go with a total of 12. And we can do the D10 effect or the D8 effect. It won't matter. Or actually, the D10, if I did the D10 effect, it would step down the effect coming in, right? We talked about that before. However, you'll notice that 17 is 5 more than 12, right? So it's going to get stepped back up anyway. So we'll do D10 effect. So that means, so what's happening here is Nightcrawler's 17 is beating the SWAT team's 12, but the SWAT team's D10 effect, so that's going to step up Nightcrawler's D10 to a D12. But then I guess order of operations probably matters here. Do you apply the heroic success increase? Because then the D10 effect wouldn't step down the D12. Probably. What would Cam Banks do? He would probably say you compare the successes or the totals first. Yeah, okay, so take back what I just said. So comparing the 17 and the 12, that increases Nightcrawler's effect to a D12. So the SWAT team having the D10 effect doesn't do anything special for them. So, all right. So they are going to end up with a D12. Very confused. Complication. So let's go with, let's just go with confused as a D12. Just to represent the fact that they've got this teleporting elf demon thing that's supposed to be dead all around them, all in amongst them and stuff. Good job. That was a good job, Nightcrawler. So that resolves all of that. Nightcrawler has acted, and there's only one person left to go. So, whoops. And that's going to be Betsy. Now, Betsy, what's she been up to? I think that Psylocke has been doing what the Hand has trained her to do, which is gaining a better position from which to ambush and strike. All stealthy 90s ninja version of herself. So I think she could try to use her psychic stuff on the SWAT team. You know what she could try to do? I had said the thing about the mutant hound, but you know what she could try to do? She could target the complication that's on the SWAT team. So instead of dealing stress, she's targeting the complication, like she's trying to add to it. And if she steps it up past 12, then they are taken out. They've been complicated out of the scene, which actually feels like a really good plan. It kind of feels like a buddy action if I had been thinking about it. So I'm actually going to let her use her buddy die, which is not her largest one, but it is, in a sense, adding to the confusion that Nightcrawler has. So that's how we're going to do that. Yeah, let's do that. So we're going to go... All right, I need to pause. Hang on a second. All right, I'm back. We're back. We're going to have Psylocke adding to the confusion. So Psylocke is acting... I'm going to say that this is her buddy die because she's riding on what Nightcrawler is currently doing. Even though Nightcrawler didn't use a buddy die, she's going to use a buddy die. So that's a D6. We have Posh, we have Trained by the Hand, we have Body Swapped, and we also have the Dystopian Night and Urban Ruins. None of these feel like they fit as a D8 for her. Posh, Trained by the Hand, and Body Swapped. Gosh, they don't really feel much like they would apply as a hindered either. Body Swapped, Trained by the Hand, and Posh. You know what? We're going to go with Posh, and we're going to use it as a D4 because she doesn't really like getting in the heads of, like, icky, gross, oppressive police state people, right? So this is not a pleasant experience for her to get inside the minds of this crew, and she doesn't enjoy it. So we're going to use Posh, and we're going to use it as a D4 and give ourselves a plot point. Grab one from over here. Then we're going to move to Telepath. So, are we mind controlling? Yeah. I mean, you could make a case for either telepathy or mind control. Multi-power, I don't think it's worth using multi-power. SFX for psychic feedback doesn't happen. And the mutant, that doesn't matter either. So we're going to go with telepathy, because she's basically trying to broadcast even more confusion into their minds. Assassin training, enhanced stamina, enhanced reflexes. This doesn't really jive with that. This is more the telepath stuff. So I don't think that really fits any of those. Covert Expert, Vehicle Expert. I will use Covert Expert because I will say I can't speak to the 90s version of Psylocke, but the version of Psylocke that I'm currently reading in Essential X-Men, which is like in the 80s, when she first comes on, she kind of stands back. And in this case, Psylocke is literally kind of in the shadows in an alleyway, sort of trying to do this. So I'm going to throw a Covert Expert in there. I'm going to allow that. I'm going to allow that for myself. So we've got a D6 buddy, D4 distinction, D8 for telepathy, and D8 for Covert Expert. Anything else going on? Oh, yes, there is something else going on. Because now her target has a complication, which she can add to her pool, because that is helping her action against them. So she's going to add that confused D12 into her pool. And there's nothing else going on, so she's going to roll that. Okay, so you can see a pretty clear example of when you take the D4 for your distinction, you're risking rolling a 1, because that's exactly what happened. She rolled a 1 on that distinction die. Ignoring that for a second, we have the 8. So it doesn't matter what the effect die size is, and I don't think I explained this earlier. When you are dealing an effect die, if you are dealing it, so let's say their effect was a D6, and I rolled and I end up doing a D10 effect, that raises their D6 up to a D10. Okay, if I am matching what they have, it steps it up only once. And if I'm lower than what they have, it's stepping it up only once. In terms of effect, I'm not talking totals, I'm talking effect. If I succeed in my total, so I only need a D6 effect to step that D12 up once more. So, but of course it turns out the 6 is a really good number in what I rolled for adding to the total. So if we do the 8 and the 6, that's a 14. And then I could just have one of the D8s. I'm going to let the Watcher, BW, buy her opportunity. This is, I think, the smallest Doom pool I've ever had. And we're going to give her another plot point, which I think Nightcrawler's... Oh, no, because he got it back. Let's grab this one. I'm going to buy that off her. Now she's got 3 plot points. And then she will then spend that plot point to keep a 3rd die. So we're going to go with a total of the 6 plus the 3 plus the 8, which is 17. With, in this case, it happens to be a D12 effect, but it doesn't matter that it's a D12. Because even if it was the D4 for some reason, if she had the D4 to be able to use, it still would affect, it still would step up that D12. That's what she's going with. So now we have the SWAT team and they need to react. So they assemble their dice pool to react to this. And that's going to be /R 3d8s. It feels like coordinated is working against them at this point. Like that's what's being... they're already affected in a negative way because of Nightcrawler's actions. So I'm going to use coordinated as a D4 because I'm probably going to fail this. They're probably going to be taken out here. So I may as well milk another Doom die. While I can, right? So D4 for coordinated. And then we'll do enhanced durability. Maybe that includes some mental conditioning as well. Oops. Their focus... Yeah, let's combine 2 of their D8s into a D10. I'm not going to worry about Doom dice to add in. So we'll go with that, see what we get. Not bad, but is it enough? I could spend Doom dice to keep the 4. If I add the 8 and the 7 for 15, it's not enough. I could spend one of my D8s from the Doom pool and it would disappear, and I could keep another dice. I couldn't keep the D10 for, because that's bigger than a D8. But if I'm spending a D8, I can keep a D8 or less, which means I could keep that D4 that rolled a 4 for a total of 19, which means Psylocke would fail. But narratively, I really love the idea of the two of them working together and stressing out, making the SWAT team completely confused. I really like that idea as a watcher. So I'm going to allow it. I'm going to have them throw this reaction, essentially, right? So I'm going to go with a total of 15 with a D4 effect, which steps up their confused D12 one more time, which makes them utterly confused, and they are taken out of the scene. So then we just grab another X, copy and paste, and copy and paste. Why did you put it down there? And then paste again? Okay. Because it really likes to put it there. So I'm Xing out all of their team dice to represent the fact that they are utterly confused as a team. Now, I will readily admit that I am rusty on some of those nooks and crannies that I was talking about before, and I may be goofing that up. I may only supposed to be stressing out one of those team die. But as I can, taking the narration into effect as both the player and the GM, I can see where this just tells a cooler story. So that's what I'm going to go with. And I like this idea. So they've confused the SWAT team completely. They're between Nightcrawler's actions and Psylocke's actions, they're completely confused. So that took us a while to do. It took us a while because it was taking the time to explain all the things that I was doing. It took us a while because I'm playing against myself, which is just wild to do. It's why I chose, one of the reasons why I chose this setting, both because I love it, but also because there's no misunderstanding the motivations behind these GM PCs, right? The Sentinel is obviously going to be trying to hurt or capture mutants. The SWAT AM team is obviously going to be trying to hurt or capture mutants. The Mutant Hound is obviously going to be trying to track down or hinder the mutants in some way, and all three of our characters are mutants. We'll stop there because this could go on forever, but if you guys like it, if it's helping you out in any way, if it's interesting to you, if it's entertaining to you, if you like the way I'm going through this and explaining, I'm going to leave it all on Roll20 set up. Let me know in the comments, and I can make another video, and we can just continue where we leave off here. But my point was to explain how to assemble the pools, right? The say it, assemble it, roll it, resolve it. How to use plot points, some of the ways to use plot points. We didn't get into assets, but we did get into stunt and complications, right? With the Gambit stunt and the confused complication on the SWAT team. So we did that. It's an action scene. We haven't done a transition scene. And then we did walk through all the different parts of the data file. So I feel like we accomplished the bulk of what I was hoping to accomplish with this video. So if you have any questions or comments, we will leave it there. Otherwise, if you have questions or comments, leave them in the comments below, right? But I mean, like, in terms of continuing this, if you want to, speak up and let me know, and we can try to do that. But I think we'll call it right there, all right? Good job, team. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us on this little tutorial, adventure, playthrough, walkthrough, overview, review of Marvel Heroic Role-Playing, and also a little bit of Cortex Prime in there as well. If you liked what you saw, if you have any comments, observations, questions, anything like that, you can ask them in the comments section, but I do encourage you to visit the cortexrpg.com website, and if you scroll down near the bottom of that, you'll see the links for the Facebook group and for the Discord channel. And I want to plug that because you can hop over to Discord. There's over 2,000 people in the Discord. Many of the people who are involved directly with Cortex and with Marvel Heroic are active there, including Cam Banks, the lead designer. But lots of knowledge over there, lots of folks. Plus, even if you hate Marvel, even if you hate Marvel Heroic, even if you just learned about Cortex Prime 5 minutes ago, and you're wanting to play Dragon Prince Tales of Zadia. I'm saying it correctly this time. We run games there on the Discord server. So you can go there, you can ask around, see if somebody wants to start up a group. Friday night is the usual kind of like pickup game time, but everybody there is always looking for other times, and if you're in a different time zone, you can coordinate with people there. So it's just a great thing to do. And then I'll mention the Marvel Plot Points website again, specifically for Marvel Heroic. That has resources for Marvel Heroic. One of the most recent resources that they actually posted on their main page was a conversion that one of the that a fan made to convert Marvel Heroic into Cortex Prime. It's very, very similar, and if you've watched the rest of this video and understood most of it, it's very, very similar. All of this will prepare you for that, but someone actually went ahead and did the extra step to fully convert it over in terms of language, in terms of those nooks and crannies, right? So it's a great place to stop by, get involved with the community, get involved in the crew, follow them on Twitter. I'm not really anybody special. You don't have to follow me anywhere. But if you do want to see more of this content, let me know, and I'll see what I can do. All right, thanks so much for watching, True Believers. I appreciate it. Scott appreciates it, too. We'll catch you next time. Thanks.